Welcome to Daily Drive for Tuesday, May 26, 2026. I'm Kellen Walker in Las Vegas. Today on the show, Honda is taking a break from its Ridgeline pickup. British automakers face a U.S. import cap that could trigger higher tariffs. And Ferrari just unveiled its first EV, designed by the guy who created the iPhone. Plus, why Nuro's COO thinks robotaxis won't become a commodity, and how the company is diversifying its business with partners Uber and Lucid.
Behind the scenes, three different parties doing three very different things, but it all comes together to have this very safe, very awesome experience for the end user.
Let's run through all the news you need to know to keep up in the auto industry. Honda is hitting pause on its Ridgeline pickup. That's because the truck can't meet tougher emission standards. The automaker will stop building the mid-size Ridgeline by year's end. Production won't restart until 2028, when a freshened version with an updated V6 rolls off the line at its Alabama plant. The 2028 redesign buys Honda time to finish developing an advanced hybrid system, which the Ridgeline is expected to get in the early 2030s. We'll have more on this in a minute with our own Urvash Kakaria. British automakers are staring down a U.S. import cap that could trigger higher tariffs. The U.S.-UK deal allows 25,000 vehicles per quarter at 10%. Go over that, the tariff jumps to 27.5%. According to the Automotive News Research and Data Center, 8 British brands sold nearly 98,000 vehicles here last year. Now, Toyota's moving GR Corolla production to the UK, which could push everyone over the limit. Here's the kicker. There's no system to coordinate who ships when. And Ferrari just unveiled its first EV, and it looks like nothing you'd expect from Ferrari. The Luce was styled by Johnny Ive, the guy who designed the iPhone. And it turns out ditching the gas engine solved a problem Ferraris had for decades. Without a gearbox taking up space in the back, they finally have room for 5 seats instead of 4. The Luce starts at around $640,000 and has over 1,000 horsepower. This is a big bet, especially since competitors like Lamborghini have backed away from electric supercars. But Ferrari says it's taking, quote, the deliberate decision to lead what comes next. And those are today's headlines. You can find more details on all those stories at autonews.com. Joining me now to talk more about the Honda Ridgeline production pause is our own Urvash Kakaria, who got the scoop for us at Automotive News. Urvash, welcome back to Daily Drive.
Great to be back, Kel. How are you doing? How was your long weekend?
It was good. It was good. How about yours?
Fantastic. Busy as usual.
All right. Well, I heard you got the scoop. So you write that the 18-month gap in production is fallout from Honda's abandoned EV plans. Can you explain that?
Yeah, so Honda is basically hitting pause on the current generation Ridgeline production. According to sources, production will end in December of this year. It will restart in the third quarter of 2028. There are several reasons this is happening. Sort of the most urgent reason is that the Ridgeline is not meeting the tightened emission standards. Honda does not want to keep selling this vehicle if it's in default, because even though the Trump administration has sort of turned a blind eye towards enforcing these tightened emission standards, the next administration might essentially not take too kindly to this and retroactively penalize automakers that have been flouting the Biden-era emission regulations. So Honda didn't want to take that risk. The other reason also is that the reason there's a pause is because, as you mentioned, Honda had essentially focused on building EVs going forward, and they had all these new EV models coming. They had devoted a lot of resource and time to developing next generation EVs. And so they didn't have, a fallback for Ridgeline, which they now need to keep a little longer. So, they're going to come up with what it's being described to me as a significant update. It's not technically a next generation, but it will have essentially a new design. It will have revised new components, and it will also have an updated V6 engine. which is the current engine, and then that updated engine will, likely bring the Ridgeline back in compliance. Today, I was speaking to some folks, and essentially, the next generation Ridgeline, which is expected in 2031, is expected to have a lot of similarity with the Passport crossover that Honda also builds, and it'll also be a more ruggedized version of the Ridgeline. So it will be very interesting to see what the next Ridgeline looks like.
What's Honda planning to do at that Alabama plant during the year and a half when the Ridgeline isn't being built?
Yeah, so Honda's kind of being opportunistic about it. The Ridgeline is built alongside the Odyssey minivan on the same assembly line. So what Honda's going to do is crank up production of Odyssey by about 20% over the next couple of years. And then they're also going to increase or expand production of the Passport, which is on another assembly line in the plant, but which is at capacity. So they're going to basically start building some Passports on that Odyssey Ridgeline line in the interim. They're going to increase Passport production by about 10%. So that's how they are essentially utilizing the plant.
And finally, Urvash, why is this Ridgeline update so significant?
Yeah, so the Ridgeline update suggests a longer term strategy that Honda has adopted. We reported a few weeks ago that Honda is extending the life cycle of a number of key models by several years. And again, this comes back to the last minute pivot from EVs to hybrids and ICE vehicles. Honda has been caught between a rock and a hard place. They've been investing in this EV plan, and suddenly that plan is not going to materialize. So they are basically extending these life cycles while they develop next generation hybrids for the Ridgeline as well as other models. So for example, the next generation Ridgeline is going to get a new V6 hybrid powertrain that's currently in development. But instead of leaving the line fallow and just continuing to sell the existing models for several years, they're going to now start investing in up refreshes, in some cases very heavy refreshes like the Ridgeline. So this news that we have on Ridgeline is suggestive of a broader strategy that Honda is taking now that it has had to pivot from EVs.
Always insightful. Urvash, thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks so much, Gil.
Nuro announced a partnership earlier this year with Uber and Lucid to bring more than 20,000 robotaxis to U.S. and international markets, starting with the Bay Area. But with Lucid posting significant losses and the challenge of scaling autonomous vehicles, questions remain about how the business model will work. Andrew Chapin, COO at Nuro, spoke with our own Molly Boygon about why he thinks robotaxis won't become a commodity, and how Nuro is diversifying its business beyond just robotaxis. They talked on the latest episode of the Automotive News Shift podcast. Here's a piece of that conversation.
It's been a big year for Nuro. You all had the announcement of a robotaxi partnership with Uber and Lucid, which is slated to bring more than 20,000 Lucid Nuro robotaxis to U.S. and international markets, beginning with the Bay Area. Talk to me a little bit about the operational and safety complexity of scaling to that volume.
Absolutely. Robotaxi is a service that is starting to proliferate. I think the public is starting to get more acquainted with it, but there is so much that goes on behind the scenes to make that happen. And let me start by saying that the beauty of this partnership between Nuro, Uber, and Lucid is that each party gets to focus on what it does best. And so Nuro is providing the safe, performant level 4 autonomy system. Lucid is providing this vehicle, the Lucid Gravity, that is not only great to ride in, but really just has a phenomenal experience for the user. It's very easily compatible with our L4 system. And then Uber, of course, is bringing the marketplace together. They are bringing rider demand. They are also owning all of the fleet operations and logistics. And so behind the scenes, 3 different parties doing 3 very different things, but it all comes together to have this very safe, very awesome experience for the end user. And as we think about safety, we are really trying to achieve a superhuman safety bar over the long term. That is the expectation of the public. And so Nuro is hard at work, really developing the Nuro driver to bring that to reality. And we are closely collaborating with both Uber and Lucid to make sure that we validate that in an incredibly rigorous way and come together with a safety case that we feel really good about.
And can you just talk a little bit more about how the actual scale challenge changes anything operationally for Nuro? In other words, is it like if you're running 10 robo taxis, it's the same process as if you're running 20,000, or what changes, at that point of scale?
Sure. I mean, first, the autonomy system itself needs to perform at a level that can handle that sort of scale. And so, again, that is the main part that falls to Nuro and the main part that we are focused on. The operational element is something that we are partnering with Uber on, but they are ultimately responsible for. And so we are trying to make sure that the Uber fleet managers or a third party in partnership with Uber has the ability to service the vehicles, troubleshoot the vehicles, make sure that they can interface with the autonomy system to manage a fleet. When you look at a company or a service that has this incredible level of operational complexity, like a robotaxi service, again, there's just so much that has to happen operationally. And our role in that is really to make sure that the interface between our technology, our autonomy system, and the folks managing the vehicles is very smooth, very scalable, so on.
When the partnership was first announced, the chatter that I heard in the industry was that this was a smart play, especially for Uber, because, it's sort of positioning itself as a future marketplace provider for consumers to basically be able to log onto their Uber app and choose their robotaxi provider of choice. However, for Nuro, that possibility is a little bit challenging because then you're competing with other providers within the same marketplace. Do you think that ultimately robotaxis are headed in that direction? And in that case, how can you differentiate in such a way that it would be the equivalent of people logging onto their Uber app and saying, I'd prefer a Toyota with XYZ software-defined vehicle platform over a Ford?
Sure. The first thing I would push back on a little bit is the notion that there is going to be this broad pool of commoditized AV players. This is just such a hard problem that so many folks have tried and failed at over the years that there is going to be a very small number of providers in the end that cross that threshold into scaled, safe, commercialized robotaxi services. And so at some point, yes, there will be competition within the Uber app, within other marketplaces in terms of AV provider A versus B, but I think we're a long ways from that, just given how hard the problem is and how far most folks still have to go to cross that threshold. Uber made the bet on Nuro that it did, partly because of where we are in our journey and the confidence that they were able to build in terms of our timeline to market. And so that really in the next few years is going to be a big differentiator. Just can you offer this service or not? And again, we feel very confident in our ability to get there faster than some other players out there. In terms of the actual user experience, part of the reason why we ended up partnering on the Lucid Gravity vehicle as opposed to something else is because it is this platform that allows us to offer a really differentiated experience. Not only is the vehicle super comfortable, quiet, safe, great range, but again, it's something that can integrate into our autonomy system and reach scale at a rate that is faster than perhaps some other vehicle platforms might, just because of the redundancy built in from the factory with respect to steering, braking, and some of the other controls. So all of that comes together to say, over the next 3 to 5 years, it's really about time to market and scale as the big differentiators. Can you actually offer a service?
I agree. I think Lucid has a lot of really interesting technological advantages over some competitors, and also top of mind because it was just earnings season is that they posted a significant loss. And so I'm wondering, given the capital intensive nature of auto manufacturing, some of Lucid's ongoing challenges, what contingency plans does Nuro have if Lucid faces production interruptions or delays or a change in direction?
Well, as you rightly note, these sort of businesses, EV startups, robotaxis, so on, are incredibly capital intensive. And so as we think about the overall timeline to market, the overall vehicle program plan, making sure that we mitigate those risks is huge. And so we have a lot of effort behind the scenes to make sure that, as supply chain risks come up or as other risks come up, that we have the ability to adjust and keep timelines on track. That's a big part of my job. It's a big part of the job of a lot of folks working on this. But when it comes to Nuro specifically, we are really targeting three different commercial verticals at the end of the day. And so we have robotaxi. Obviously, this is a big bet for us. We have logistics, so last mile delivery and the like. And then we ultimately have personally owned vehicles as well, level 4 personally owned vehicles into the future. And so our business is going to be diversified across those different verticals. And we have active partnerships being negotiated in those other verticals that we'll share more on soon. So all of that is to say, we're very focused on delivering for this initial partnership. And over time, you'll start to see a more diversified commercial customer base for us.
Andrew Chapin of Nuro spoke with our own Molly Boygon. You can hear their full conversation on the Automotive News Shift podcast. That's available now wherever you get your podcasts. That's Daily Drive for today. I'm Kellen Walker. Thanks to Automotive News executive producer Jake Neer, as well as our own Urvash Kakaria and Richard Truitt for their reporting for today's podcast. We also had reporting from Luca Schiferi of our sibling publication, Automotive News Europe. You can get the latest news on Honda's Ridgeline production pause, Ferrari's first EV, and everything happening in the auto industry at autonews.com. Come back tomorrow for a conversation about the saga of the Gordie Howe Bridge, a critical trade connection between the U.S. and Canada that's set to open amid landmark trade talks. We'd love to hear from you. Let us know what you think of the show and the topics we covered today. Send us an email at dailydrive@autonews.com or leave us a voicemail at 313-444-2774. And if you enjoy the podcast, remember to like, leave a review, and subscribe so you never miss an episode.